think that my biggest obstacle has always been to get out of my head. And to get over that, I find that I make that leap to get out of my head when I seek the counsel of others. So that's where having a network of people that you trust is very important. So for me, the first thing I do to get out of my head is I reach for God. Now, I sometimes need an additional, push and or pull from humanity. So my husband is a great resource for that. And then certainly my family, my mother and friends. And recently I purchased something called a priority tree. I love this thing. It's a handmade thing that somebody makes out of wood. And it's stacked blocks of things that people put into priority. Your relationship with God, your relationship with your mate, your relationship with your family, church, community obligations, work, all of these things, right? And it's interesting how when that priority tree, for example, those blocks, they stack up and they're not connected. It's like kindergarten when you stack the blocks, they're in a decreasing width. And if you stack them correctly, the priority tree stands. If you try to put the smaller block under the bigger block and your priorities are out of order, it's going to tumble. And so a lot of times getting out of my head helps me see really what's out of priority. So when things are, when I'm faced with not challenges are good and bad. But it's when I'm I'm upside down, inside out, and on fire. Usually it's because my priorities are out of alignment. And usually that's because I'm stuck in my head with some loop.
What is an obstacle that you use this, your tools for, that you got over? Can you name one in particular that comes to mind?
I have a big obstacle I came over.
That's what I mean. Just anything, and
I don't
see how you put it.
This is what comes into my head. So, something pretty out of order was I got sober December 2nd, 2009. Thank you very much. And you can imagine how much into my head I was. And it wasn't until I, because how do you get it? That's, gosh, I wish I had something that was maybe a little more tangible to the viewers, because not everybody has walked that path of addiction and or alcoholism. It was a pretty big obstacle, I'll say.
Well, the thing is about that is that one thing I know about addiction, and I had a lot of contact over the last about 35 years with that, is that support is number one. And because what I have learned is that you really just can't do it alone. It's just bigger than us. It's bigger than what we can do by ourselves. Because if we could do it by ourselves, we sure as heck would, we'd say, okay, no more, just turn it off.
My life is out of control. Maybe,
right.
Yeah. And so, even still after 10 years of sobriety, mm-hmm. Boy, that stinking thinking is what they call it, but it's stuck in my head, right? So it's always a tangible representation of what I mean by that, because whether or not today I choose not to participate in my alcoholism, that doesn't mean that I, what's between my two ears is, in perfect harmony, right? What I used to drink about, now I seek counsel. I pray about it, and then I get, into a conversation like you're talking about. I get involved in my support system, so that whatever that obstacle is of the day, and I guess that's why when you ask me, is there a specific obstacle? Gosh, I'm just such a different person. If you had asked me this years ago, my answer is I don't focus on the obstacle. I'm focused on the solution. So it wasn't an easy answer for me to say, well, what's an obstacle right now? Gosh.
Well, that was a great example of it. And the other thing is that, you know, alcoholism, ISM, those are the characteristics, and still having the characteristics of what made you do it in the first place. And the characteristics are the things that in life, I mean, I know I have to look at it, and other people I know as well. And that's what the beauty is.
And I think, ultimately what moves me forward is just thinking, what is the next right thing in front of me? If you had asked me even, two, 2 or 3 years ago, if you had asked me that I'd have a nonprofit working with other women that are, that have alcoholism or drug addiction, I would have said, no, I think you have the wrong person, So obstacles are an opportunity to grow and to learn, and so we have them, whether or not it's I don't have anything for dinner, and how I'm going to let that affect my mood and my engagement with my family. It can, for some people, something like something, and I don't want to say it's trivial, because walk a mile in someone else's shoes and not having any idea what to make for dinner probably is a domino from something else that is tipped over in the last straw and all these things, right? So but ultimately it's step back, take a breath, and focus on the solution as opposed to the problem or the obstacle, and then whatever it is, that process is going to work again and again and again for whatever that obstacle is.
Yeah, and I'm hearing also that you got the support, so you knew that. I know sometimes, I don't know about you, but I might just get up feeling angry. I can't tell you, oh, I'm feeling angry, because I don't always know. And at a point in my life where I know all my tools and everything, I get my own answers. And I think that's with a lot of the women that I work with, that sometimes they just might be really angry. They might, or somebody might say something, or a brother or sister might just say one comment or look at you a certain way. And all of a sudden, just, back to when we used to react like that. And we're grateful we can have a place to put a stop on that.
Yeah, and you said something. So again, that's a great tangible example of something that I think most people would raise their hand to. Have you ever woken up just angry, frustrated, angry, and not even really be able to say why? Get out of your own head, right? And take a step back. It's like you're so close when you if you've ever been to the art museum and you see some of the works of art that you can walk right up to and you're nose to nose with it, you can't even tell what you're looking at. But if you step back, right, it can come into focus. You can get some clarity. And so a lot of times, whatever that is, from waking up angry or frustrated to facing your addiction, wow, that's a span of obstacles, isn't it? The process is the same. The process is the same, whether it's that obstacle or that obstacle, clarity and aiming for the solution. And for me, that's getting out of my own head and seeking the counsel and support, as you had mentioned, in my network, which is God, my husband, my family, and friends.
Which is wonderful. And and I think that's so important for women. And nowadays, and I'm kind of curious about this, even though I know you and your husband work together, but just pretend that you and your husband want to work with someone. What would the characteristics be? Let's say it's a woman. Okay. Well, I'm doing a lot of let's say. But what are the characteristics of someone that you would be interested in collaborating with?
So, when I think about somebody who I want to work with, I see it as a real synergistic experience. And even though I don't quilt, I love quilts. They're so comfy and wonderful and beautiful. It makes me think of a quilt. It makes me think of, the backing, the padding, and then their fabric pieces. And visually I can see that as us working together. And so ultimately, I look for someone who has integrity. Like that's the backbone of it all, because integrity is going to lead to, honesty and principles, right? Built on that. And and then I think, well, okay, then the next thing that would layer upon that kind of mutual now relationship is the ability to be compassionate, right? And that's the batting of the quilt, the warmth, right, is the ability to be compassionate with one another, because in our humanity we're not going to be perfect. So if we're working together, we need to appreciate that, right? And then because they're going to be bringing their square to my square, to her square, to his square, whatever it is, that we're a team, and then we're putting this all together. We need to, while we're stitching that together, right, honor, respect, and value their piece. We don't want their piece to look like our piece. You don't, I mean, if you've ever seen a really great quilt, that's not how they come together. You don't have 20 duplicates.
And work together, but just pretend that you and your husband want to work with someone. What would the characteristics be? Let's say it's a woman.
Okay.
Boy, I'm doing a lot of let's say. But what are the characteristics of someone that you would be interested in collaborating with?
So when I think about somebody who I want to work with, I see it as a real synergistic experience. And even though I don't quilt, I love quilts. They're so comfy and wonderful and beautiful. It makes me think of a quilt. It makes me think of, the backing, the padding, and then their fabric pieces. And I can see that as us working together. And so ultimately, I look for someone who has integrity. Like that's the backbone of it all, because integrity is going to lead to, honesty and principles, right? Built on that. And then I think, well, okay, then the next thing that would layer upon that kind of mutual now relationship is the ability to be compassionate, right? And that's the batting of the quilt, the warmth, right, is the ability to be compassionate with one another, because in our humanity we're not going to be perfect. So if we're working together, we need to appreciate that, right? And then because they're going to be bringing their square to my square, to her square, to his square, whatever it is, that we're a team, and then we're putting this all together. We need to, while we're stitching that together, right, honor, respect, and value their piece. We don't want their piece to look like our piece. I mean, if you've ever seen a really great quilt, that's not how they come together. You don't have 20 duplicates. That's what makes it so amazing, right? And so I would want someone who it's evident that they have integrity. It's evident that they are compassionate, and that they're excited too about being synergistic and piecing that all together.
That's fabulous. I have to ask, what does synergy mean? People have so many different definitions of it. How do you define it?
For me, it means coming together, and that coming together creates its own version of another kind of a spark. Wow. Right? So it's not this, it's this.
Yes, and creating something better.
Reminds me of the
like a firecracker. Oh yeah. Oh boy, we're now. For those who weren't there, both of us were teachers. That's why that was something we did with the children. So
the firecracker clap.
I think I like that more than the kids. I always loved it. But what a wonderful analogy, a quilt, and isn't that beautiful? And I actually, in a little video I did, I talked about the tapestry of life and how we all blend in. And I love the way you put in the quilt. I mean, that really is something that we all can relate to. Can you share a quote or two that comes to mind?
Yes.
Good.
So, two quotes always come to my mind. And one is one I grew up hearing my father say. My dad died in 2014, and I wasn't going to
So
tear up.
soon. Oh, I'm sorry. It's
No,
a
it's a great tear.
happy memory,
Yeah, of course.
of course.
And I can see him. I can call him into my heart and into my head
Yeah.
anytime I want. And so I'm really grateful that I grew up with something he would say, and he would always say, "Onward and upward." And onward and upward. I had looked that up a long time ago, and I found out it was actually in the inverse of that, uh, onwards and then upwards, in some poem that was written like 200 years ago.
Wow.
I don't know that my dad ever found it through that. I'm not sure, but for me, it really is a great short, get out of my head opportunity to think about a lot of things. And that is, moving onward, stepping forward into your day, letting the past serve you as a place to have a lesson learned, and upward in the sense that, when it's a spiritual experience for me, as well as how to serve others. And that's just to lift them up. And a lot of times lifting others up is how you yourself rise up as well. So that is one of my favorite quotes. And the other favorite quote I have, I don't even know where this came from. So I think Tina did it.
It's a Tina. It's a Tina.
As of today, I'm going to call it a Tina-ism.
There you go.
I have seen it around used, but my goodness, wake up, your life is happening. Wake up,
Great.
your
I love
life
it.
is happening. I mean,
Boy, that's beautiful.
there's a whole this versus that when you think, well, how do I know if I'm awake, And do you know what your happy is? If you don't, make a list and start participating in what makes you happy. Know what your goals are, so that when you say no to things or yes to things, they're tied to whatever your personal goals are, and be compassionate and empathetic, and be on purpose every day. Wake up, your life is happening doesn't mean that today every day we went to Disney. It's really like that stop and smell the roses kind of a thing, right?
It's really interesting you say that, and I'll have to give you the information because a friend of mine, her name is Sarah Gish, she actually has a whole, all of her life, it's a long story, but it's called Ignite Your Life. And what she does is that she helps other people ignite their lives. And Sarah, I put a plug for Sarah, she's really great, and
Yes.
she has it, Ignite Your Life, like wake up your life. It's so interesting that you clicked on that. Thank you. Because
wake up, your life is happening.
I love it. I love that. I love it. Wake up. Boy, if you don't get up with that, we won't. I love it. We are awake, and thank you for helping us be more awake with your insight today. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I am highly honored to be included in your platform to pay forward. My nonprofit, CARE, stands for Create Dares to Care. And the CARE stands for Create a Ripple Effect. And you are a woman who is on purpose. It's evidenced in everything that you do that you are on purpose to create a ripple effect. And I am honored to be a part of that. So thank you for asking.
Thank you so very much. I appreciate that. We will be in touch.
All right.
God bless you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.